Shalom. This week I want to deviate from the Torah portion and just talk about the situation that we find ourselves in. Social distancing to flatten the curve. Isolating ourselves to save ourselves. Limiting our contact to save the lives of others. There is a section in the Torah that many of us skip, or at least want to skip. And that is the section found in the book of Leviticus from about the 13th chapter to the 15th chapter. And that is the purification ceremony for a person afflicted with what is called tzara'at. Tzara'at was a skin disease, often translated in English as leprosy. But actually the symptoms listed doesn't present itself as leprosy as we know it. The person who was diagnosed with tzara'at was isolated in biblical days, quarantined for a period of time, and that person was ultimately returned to the community. Now, I don't want to go into details about the disease or the symptoms or the treatment. That's really what makes the section so troubling and skippable to begin with. But what I want to focus on instead is something I think more important for today and today's circumstances. When a person was in isolation back then, who in the community regularly checked in on that afflicted soul? The priest of Israel, the Kohen. In those days, I'm sure he took on the status, like in most cultures, as that of a shaman, a healer, a medicine man. So a visit from the Kohen, the priest of Israel, that seems understandable. But I'm thinking something different. Here was the most prestigious person in the community, the man closest to God in that world, the priest, the man with the daily task of performing the most sacred tasks of Israel, visiting the most vulnerable, the most lonely, the most isolated person in the community. The priest of Israel came to him and talked to him. I thought about that today because imagine what a phone call would do for someone you might know today. And I don't mean a person you talk to all the time. I mean that someone you always you tell yourself all the time, I gotta call that person and see how he's doing, what's happening. Or that person who always gets from you a funny meme or a K-text. Maybe a teacher, maybe a doctor, a minister, a person you might only talk to when you need something. Imagine calling that person just to check in and say, I'm just checking in on you. I was thinking about you. Imagine what the person with tzara'at thought when through his door came the most important person in the community, calling when no one else did and no one else could. Imagine now a phone call out of the blue from a person you didn't expect, who just called not to need something, but just to say, thinking about you. I wanted to make sure you and your family are well. What would that do for a person who is isolated today in our situation? My friends, we're not doctors. We are, in fact, isolated ourselves. But that phone call today is how we can heal the world today. One call at a time. It's time for me to make some phone calls. My friends, stay safe, flatten the curve. God bless.